Hi students, and welcome back to the continuation of our discussion of evolution. In this section, we will be examining how interactions between species helps influence evolution. In the last section, we learned how natural selection influences evolution. Of course, in order for a species to survive and evolve, it must continue to pass its genes on to future generations. So it's important that the members of the species have successful interactions with members of their own species and also other species. So our primary learning objective in this lesson is to understand how interactions among and between species can hinder or enhance survival, natural selection, and evolution. So in this slide, what kind of action do you think the shark is contemplating? Resource limitations influence a species' adaptation to its environment and its ecological niche. But interactions with other species also help shape species' traits and behaviors. Competition and predation cause species to evolve in response to each other's attributes. Cooperative interactions and even interdependent relationships also confer advantages, which can lead to evolution of traits. In this section, we will look at the interactions within and between species that affect their success and shape biological communities. Competition is a type of antagonistic relationship within a biological community. Organisms compete for resources that are in limited supply, like energy and matter in usable forms, living space, and specific sites to carry out life's activities. Plants compete for growing space to develop roots and leaves so they can absorb and process sunlight, water, and nutrients. Animals compete for living, nesting, and feeding sites and also for mates. Competition among members of the same species is called intraspecific competition, whereas competition between members of different species is called interspecific competition. Here we see an example of intraspecific competition in this confrontation between two bighorn sheep. These rams are battling for seniority and dominance in the herd. Here we see an example of interspecific competition, or competition between two different species. Both the lion and the hyena live in the same ecological niche. Both are predators, and both compete for the same resources. All organisms need food to live. Producers make their own food, whereas consumers eat organic matter created by other organisms. As we saw in Chapter 2, photosynthetic plants and algae are the producers in nearly all communities. Consumers include herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, scavengers, detritivores, and decomposers. Often, we think only of carnivores as predators, but ecologically, a predator is any organism that feeds directly on another living organism, whether or not it kills the prey. Herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores, which feed on live prey, are predators. But scavengers, detritivores, and decomposers, which feed on dead things, are not. Insect herbivores are predators, as much as lions and tigers. Insects consume the vast majority of biomass in the world. Complex predation and defense mechanisms have evolved between insects and their plant prey. Microscopic plants and animals form the basic levels of many aquatic food chains and account for a large percentage of total world biomass. In this slide, we note that the planktonic animals eat each other as well as being prey for larger carnivores. However, the relationship may change with life stage as animals become larger and the prey becomes a predator or the predator becomes a prey. Prey organisms have developed countless strategies to avoid predation, including toxic or bad-tasting compounds, body armor, extraordinary speed, and the ability to hide. Plants have evolved thick bark, spines, thorns, or distasteful and even harmful chemicals in tissues like poison ivy and stinging nettle are examples. In response, animals have found strategies for avoiding spines, eating through thick bark, or tolerating chemicals. Arthropods, amphibians, snakes, and some mammals produce noxious odors or poisonous secretions that cause other species to leave them alone. Speed is a common defense against predation. On the Serengeti Plain of East Africa, the swift Thompson's gazelle and even swifter cheetah are engaged in an arms race of speed and endurance. The cheetah has an edge in a surprise attack because it can accelerate from 0 to 72 kilometers per hour in 2 seconds. But the gazelle often escapes because the cheetah lacks stamina. A general term for this close adaptation of two species is called coevolution. Poison arrow frogs of the family Dendrobatidae display striking patterns and brilliant colors that alert potential predators to the extremely toxic secretions of their skin. Indigenous people in Latin America use the toxin to arm blowgun darts. This walking stick is highly camouflaged to blend in with the forest floor, a remarkable case of selection and adaptation. Can you see the stick bug? In Batasian mimicry, a stinging wasp in figure A has bold yellow and black bands, which a harmless longhorn beetle mimics in photograph B to avoid predators. Similarly, the benign viceroy butterfly has evolved to closely resemble the distasteful monarch butterfly. When two unpalatable or dangerous species who look alike, we call it Mullerian mimicry. When predators learn to avoid either species, both benefit. In contrast to predation and competition, some interactions between organisms can be non-antagonistic or even beneficial. In such relationships called symbiosis, two or more species live intimately together with their fates linked. Symbiotic relationships often involve coevolution. Symbiotic relationships often enhance the survival of one or both partners. In lichens, a fungus and a photosynthetic partner, either an alga or a cyanobacterium, combine tissues to mutual benefit. A symbiotic relationship such as this, in which both species clearly benefit, is also called mutualism. Commensalism is a type of symbiosis in which one member clearly benefits, and the other apparently is neither benefited nor harmed. Many mosses, bromeliads, and other plants growing on trees in the moist tropics are considered commensals. These epiphytes are watered by rain and obtain nutrients from leaf litter and falling dust, and often they neither help nor hurt the trees on which they grow. Robins and sparrows that inhabit suburban yards are commensal with humans. Parasitism, a form of predation, may also be considered symbiosis because of the dependency of the parasite on its host. This table presents the differences in the interactions between two different species. Remember that mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism are types of symbiotic relationships. Symbiosis refers to species living together. For example, lichens consist of a fungus which gives structure and an alga or cyanobacterium which photosynthesizes. Mutualism is a symbiotic relationship that benefits both species, such as a lichen and a parasite-eating red-billed oxpecker, and a parasite-infested impala, shown in photo B. Commensalism benefits one species but has little evident effect on the other, as with a tropical tree and a free-loading bromeliad, shown in photo C. A keystone species plays a critical role in a biological community that is out of proportion to its abundance. Lions, wolves, tigers, which limited herbivore abundance and reduced the herbivory of plants, are an example. Originally, keystone species were thought to be only top predators, but scientists now recognize that less conspicuous species also play keystone roles. Tropical fig trees, for example, bear fruit year-round at a low but steady rate. If figs were removed from a forest, many fruit-eating animals would starve in the dry season when fruit or of other species is scarce. In turn, the disappearance of frugivores or fruit-eating animals would affect plants that depend on them for pollination and seed dispersal. The effect of a keystone species on communities ripples across multiple trophic levels. Off the northern Pacific coast, a giant brown alga forms dense kelp forests, which shelter fish and shellfish species from predators, allowing them to become established in the community. Within this kelp forest are also sea urchins, which graze on the kelp on the seafloor, and sea otters, which eat the sea urchins. When sea otters have been eliminated, by trapping or predation, for example, the urchins overgraze and diminish the kelp forests, potentially causing collapse of this complex system. Because of their critical role in supporting the entire kelp forest, otters are seen as a classic example of a keystone species. Here is another example of a keystone species. A single mountain lion near the Mackenzie Mountains can roam an area of hundreds of kilometers. The deer, rabbits, and bird species in the ecosystem are at least partially controlled by the presence of the mountain lion. Their feeding behavior, or where they choose to make their nests and burrows, are largely a reaction to the mountain lion's activity. Scavenger species, such as vultures, are also controlled by the activity of the mountain lion. In this section, we have learned about several types of species interactions: competition, predation, coevolution, and symbiosis, which itself has three primary forms: parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. Each of these affects natural selection by either helping or hindering the survival of individuals and ultimately species.